Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've got a first impressions to do for you. I opened this knife up just yesterday, and this is the Spyderco Tuff. This is such a crazy cool knife. I've wanted a Tuff for a long time. I talked about this in the unboxing. This is just a knife that's been on my radar for like forever. But they're discontinued now, so they're a little bit difficult to find if you do want one. They're not exactly cheap. It's a Taichung Spyderco. I believe these originally retailed like $285, $300, somewhere right around that ballpark. I was lucky to find one. I was lucky to buy one from a friend who I trusted. He actually bought this from another friend of ours, so I know both of the previous owners of this knife, and they're both buddies of mine. So really cool that I've got this one. It also feels like it's a little extra special because it's been in the hands of friends. This knife is a tank. This is kind of like, I don't know, some people might not like this parallel, but it almost feels like if Zero Tolerance built a Spyderco. It's just thick titanium lockside with a firm frame lock. It's got a nice lock bar insert. It's a thick stock of 3V blade steel. We've got a G10 show scale over a nice solid thick liner. The liner is skeletonized. It looks like there's 4 kind of big holes drilled in there. There's no internal milling on this lock side, but as you can see, one of the kind of crowning features of the Tuff is all of these like divots drilled into it. So I guess you could kind of call that weight relief or external milling on the lock side. And it's of course matched on the show side on the G10. They've drilled that same kind of hole pattern all over it. I think it looks different, it looks cool. I dig the uniqueness of it. Some people might think that that's not the coolest feature. I like it. One thing I'm impressed with is I wasn't sure if this knife was going to Spidey flick well. I've heard mixed reports on that. I don't know if some are firmer detents than this one is, but this detent is great for Spidey flicking. I really like Spidey flicking this knife. I played with it quite a bit last night after opening it up. I just kind of had it on the couch with me as I was watching TV, and yeah, it's done excellent. This knife has been sharpened. It's wearing a mirrored edge, which is actually a really nice, very sharp edge. You can see how thick behind the edge it is by how tall that edge bevel is. Sorry for my voice cracking there. It's been a rough hike today. Anyways, that kind of tall secondary bevel there, edge bevel, is evidence of how thick this sucker stays behind the edge, especially out towards the tip. It is just a monster. This knife was not designed, in my opinion, to be a slicey little EDC knife. This thing is, I suppose it's probably focused on outdoor use, which is what I intend to use it for. I think there could be an argument made for this knife as like a tactical folder. The way that this grip works does feel like it could kind of be a fighting knife. It's almost like, I think K-Bar makes, it's called the TDI. It's kind of a fixed blade that has like a cant like this, where the blade comes off almost like it's a pistol. I've seen a couple other companies that have done that have come and gone, but it seems to be kind of a style for fighting knives to have that angle here. This one I would say is less harsh than some of those are, but it does feel like if I was going to come at somebody with a knife, this knife wouldn't be a bad choice the way that it's shaped. I don't know if that was the design purpose. I'm not a knife fighter. I haven't trained extensively in knife fighting or anything like that. So I'm not going to weigh in too much on that. But to me, this knife will be a great outdoor folder. And I think part of the evidence of that is the steel choice. 3V is an awesome outdoor steel. It is just crazy tough. And so for a steel to baton with, to chop with, to go through hard materials like you find out in a place like this, 3V is an excellent steel choice. I really like 3V for outdoor applications. And so the fact that it's not only 3V, but it's a really thick blade stock of 3V, the edge profile isn't exactly slicey. I think it's kind of focused for this type of environment, and I'm excited to see how it does out here. I'm gonna be doing some testing on it and just kind of seeing what it's made of. But yeah, first impressions on this are really good. This is one of those knives that I was scared I was gonna be disappointed by. that happens when you buy a lot of knives, when you're in this hobby, at least to me. Sometimes there's knives I get really excited about, and I can be excited about them for a long time, and then I finally get it and it's kind of a letdown because it's just not what I was hoping it would be, or it just ergonomically doesn't agree with me, or for whatever the reason may be. Sometimes knives are a letdown, especially when you've built them up in your mind, like I do a lot of the time when I've got a knife on the way and I've watched a bunch of reviews about it and I'm stoked, and then I get it and it just falls apart in the hand. This knife didn't do that. This knife got here and it is what I hoped it would be in real life. Yeah, I had really high expectations for it too. Like I said, I've wanted one for a really long time. I've thought they're so cool. So the fact that it's here and it is so cool, and that it's not so massive that it doesn't work in my hand. These ergos actually feel really good for me. I like having this knife in hand. It feels comfortable. It feels like it's ready to work and to be used. It's going to be interesting seeing how the geometry of where this edge lands in relation to my hand is for using. I imagine if I'm doing detail work, I will choke up into that forward choil, and then the blade becomes a pretty usable edge. Back here, I don't know, maybe for chopping this will feel good. We'll see. I don't have any knives that are angled like this, so that's going to be interesting, but I will say in hand it feels great. It's a great example of good Spyderco jimping. Nice and tight, not too rough, not overly sharp. I've heard a lot of people say that this Spidey hole is way too sharp. This one doesn't feel any sharper than pretty much any of my other Spydercos. It doesn't bother me. It feels a lot like my Yojimbo 2 hole. Maybe that's just because of the thickness and kind of, I don't know, but it feels good. I like it. I love that I can Spidey flick it, that it deploys reliably. The lock bar is firm. I've heard some people say that it's way too firm. I don't think it's crazy. It is a little bit sharp here. There's no real access other than it sits just barely proud, and there's some real fine jimping on it to access it here. But it doesn't like hurt my finger to use. I haven't gotten fatigued by it yet. I don't find myself not wanting to play with this for a long time because, oh, disengaging the lock hurts or something. No, it's fun to play with. I fidgeted with it all night last night. I fidgeted with it again this morning. I'm playing with it now. I like playing with this knife. It just feels solid and beefy, and the tolerances also feel really, really tight on it. This is not drop shutty at all, but the way that these washers glide, it feels very smooth and glassy the whole way through. It feels like a nice Taichung Spyderco. It really does, and I dig it. I really, really like this knife. I'm so glad that I jumped on one. I'm also kind of glad that it's already been used and it's a little bit beat up, because if it was too pretty, I'd be worried that I'm trying to get over that, but I might be a little bit hesitant to really hard use this thing. So the fact that it came to me already having been hard used is just like, I'm just gonna use it. I'm just gonna beat on it, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. So anyways, first impressions of the Tuff are really, really good. I like this knife a lot. I'll turn you around real quick for some kind of glamour shots where you can see this knife a little bit better, and yeah, that way you can see the fine details up close and personal, but I like this knife. All right, so here is the Tuff up close and personal. You can see that mirrored edge on there. It looks really good. I dig mirrored edges. I don't necessarily personally find them way more functional than like a working edge, but I like it aesthetically. I feel like, especially with how nice the satin finish on this blade is, you can see this knife has seen some use. It's got some scuffs, some scratches on it, and that's fine by me. This knife is going to get used hard in my hands too. The pocket clip also shows quite a bit of wear. You can see it's scratched up a decent bit. I don't even know if I could get a replacement clip for this knife. I assume if I looked around hard enough I could, but yeah, that clip has been used. One of the things that makes this frame lock pretty stiff compared to others, I think, is just the geometry of it. That this is a pretty short frame lock. A lot of frame locks, the cut comes way further down than that. You can see it's got this hardened interface, that insert in there. I like that the screws go in from the inside aesthetically, that this doesn't show hardware there. Looks cool. Speaking of hardware, the hardware on this knife is great. I think these are T10s. They might be T8s, but they look like nice, good hardware. And then the pivot, I think, looks cool. It's still a Torx bit. It looks like either an 8 or a 10. It's like the same size as those, but the fact that it has this kind of like big, it's not a collar, it's like still the same piece of hardware, but that it's got these little divots in it. It almost looks like you'd need a spanner to use it, but it's a Torx. So I think it looks aesthetically pretty cool. I dig the divots, the craters that are drilled in here. I've heard it expressed that it kind of looks like a kid got a hold of a drill press and just kind of went to town on it in a bunch of spots. It's like seemingly random. It's not necessarily really a pattern, but I think it looks kind of cool, and especially in person, kind of the depth that it gives to the knife. It's just, I like it better than if this was just a plain tie flat slab lockside. Yeah, I think it looks cooler this way. I like that they've mirrored it here on the G10 of the show scale. It looks good to me. I don't dislike this at all. I like the way that this G10 is finished too. This feels a lot softer than most of Spyderco's G10. Like my PM2s and Para 3s have all been way rougher than this. So I don't know if this is a Taichung thing. I think this is probably my first knife from Taichung with carbon or with G10 on it. I think all of my Taichung Spydercos have been full titanium. So I guess I had a, what was it, a Sage 5? I think those are from Taichung, but that one was like the peel ply carbon. I guess my smock too. Does this? I don't know if the smock comes from Taichung. I'm probably sounding like an idiot now. Anyways, this I'm pretty sure is my first G10 from Taichung, and I like it. It's much less aggressive than it is on some of the other Spyderco models that do have G10, and it's grippy enough though. I get good traction on it. I like it. I can feel these kind of divots in with my fingertips, which is interesting, different. I don't like it or dislike it per se. I can just feel that they're there. There's no real hot spots on here. That angle is really cool to me, the way that the blade comes off in a different direction than typically you would see a knife blade come out of a handle from Spyderco. This knife just feels unique and different, and as somebody who likes Spyderco and also somebody who owns and has owned a lot of different knives, it's fun for me to experience things that are different but aren't like unfunctionally different. Like this knife still feels and functions like a good knife, but it's super different, and I like that. It's fun to have some spice and some variety in the collection and in the pocket, and I plan to carry and use this knife, so it'll be fun to kind of see what people's reactions are of this knife. It's obviously rather large, it's different looking, I feel like it's attention grabbing, it's got some really unique details to it, but it's just so cool. I really dig the Tuff, and I am glad that I jumped on one, because it's good to finally get something that you've wanted for a long time too. So anywho, that'll be the close-up shots. I've rambled enough about this knife when I was in front of the camera. I can spare you from more first impressions. I don't know how much more impressionate this knife can get, if that's even a word. Anywho, there will be a full review on this guy soon. I'll probably also do kind of a use test video, so be on the lookout for those. But this is the Spyderco Tuff First Impressions.